Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We made it finally to Thor the Dark World. I don't have a whole lot to say about this movie, kind of like Iron Man 3. I don't really love it, I don't hate it, it's just kind of an okay film. So let's get into Thor the Dark World. So the movie opens up with a kind of flashback narration of the Dark Elves fighting Bor, Odin's father, for the Ether, and we get introduced to the Ether. And this is kind of an interesting opening. That they kind of did this in the first Thor movie with the flashback of Odin fighting the Frost Giants. But the interesting thing is it doesn't actually explain the Dark Elves and what their purpose is, and it doesn't really explain the Ether very well either. And so I'm not sure why we have this opening. I guess it's to introduce the Dark Elves, who are wearing these like Shy Guy masks from Mario. But I don't understand what their motivations are. I mean, I guess they existed before light or something, they say, entered the world. Maybe they existed before the Infinity Stones. It's not really clear what these Dark Elves want. They just want everything to return to darkness? Why? And then I guess once the Asgardians take the Ether and hide it, the Dark Elves just go to sleep for thousands of years? Until the Ether is reawakened and that awakens them. None of this makes any sense. The Ether concept doesn't really make any sense, especially knowing what it is. And they did know what it is because they reveal it at the end of the movie in the end credit scene. The Ether is the Reality Stone. If it's the Reality Stone, how are the Dark Elves using it in a way to control reality? It's not. It's being used more as a weapon. Like we saw the Tesseract and the Mind Stone Scepter. And so, I mean, maybe just Infinity Stones in general are just powerful weapons, but they do have specific things that they each do, and why not use that specific thing when you have something like the Ether that is a Reality Stone? Now, there also is something called the Convergence going on in this movie, which is where the 9 realms align into some sort of portal thing where you can just kind of travel in between them and they get mixed up and everything and whatever. I mean, are they using the Ether to control reality, and the Convergence allows them to control all 9, the reality in all 9 realms? Because if that's the case, then that's not really explained very well in this movie either. So the opening is kind of a fun battle scene, kind of gives to give us some action right away, but it doesn't really do much to explain who the Dark Elves are and what the Ether is. And then back on Asgard, we get the Trial of Loki, obviously against his crimes committed in the first Avengers movie. And it's actually a really good trial. I really like it. It is really kind of like sad. Like all Loki has ever wanted is just like the approval of Odin and to be considered Odin's son. And then, Odin calls him his son, and then he says, "You're not my father," or something like that. And Loki's got a lot of daddy issues, but I do like that they really kind of set up that relationship that he has with his mom, Frigga. And that's kind of a touching moment. And when you see him like kind of talking to her, and she's kind of like projected herself into his cell, and they're having a good conversation, and she says, "Then am I not your mother?" And you can see kind of like the heartbreak on both their faces, but then he does say like, "You're not." But then when she dies, you can see how it destroys him. And so I really do like that kind of setup that we have and character progression with Loki in this movie. And then we see Thor and the Warriors 3 and Sif are all fighting battles, and they're on Vanaheim, which apparently is the homeworld of one of the Warriors 3. I forget his name. And so he gets left behind, and then they're kind of setting up this thing between Thor and Sif in this movie. And I kind of like it at the beginning, but then once they bring Jane in, it's kind of like this girl-on-girl rivalry type thing. That doesn't work as well. But Sif is really cool, and I like her in this, and we get to see the Warriors 3 fighting some more, which is kind of cool. And then we get this whole side thing on Earth with Jane, Darcy's intern, and then Eric Selvig. And that stuff doesn't work as well. So Jane is moping over Thor 2 years later, which is a trope that I really don't like in movies. It's always, we met and we knew each other for a few days or a week, and then haven't seen them in years, and I'm still longing for them. They do this with Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman movies, and they do it here, and I really don't like it. It's like, it's been 2 years, you knew him for a couple days, you had one kiss, get over it, Jane. And so, but Darcy's always fun. Darcy's great here. She's still as funny as ever. Although, it does kind of point out a little bit of an inconsistency, because even in this movie, Darcy still is not a scientist. She's like, I don't know what these things do. But yet, when we get to WandaVision, she's like an expert in her field, and she can do all this crazy stuff. So, I do kind of wish maybe this movie would have established her as being more into the science and more learning, learning with Jane and Eric and knowing a bit more, so that when we get to WandaVision, it makes kind of sense. But anyway, so then Jane ends up finding a portal. She goes to wherever the Asgardians hid the ether because of the convergence. Is got these fluctuating portals everywhere, and the ether gets sucked inside of her, and so that's what calls Thor down to her. He takes Jane to Asgard, where they can try and fix her maybe, but it doesn't work. And the ether awakes Malekith and the Dark Elves, and then they go to Asgard, and they destroy Asgard. And then I do like the kind of plan to break Jane out of Asgard. That's kind of fun, and involving Sif and the Warriors is kind of fun, and then having Loki help them is a lot of fun. Then the movie kind of just falls apart after that, because then we get them fighting Malekith on Spartalheim, which is the Dark World or something. And that, to me, is where the climax of the movie should have been. We have this fake death with Loki and everything, and then Malekith ends up getting the ether from Jane, but then we have to go back to Earth because we have to include the Earth characters. And so then they're in London for reasons. Why? Again, we don't know anything about the Convergence, and we don't know anything about the Dark Elves. So they fight in London. Thor and Jane has to use her science, technology, or whatever to help Thor fight him. Again, none of this makes any sense. And eventually they end up killing Malekith. So yeah, I don't really have many thoughts on this movie. I think some of it's pretty good. I feel almost like they wanted to bring Jane and the characters back, but they didn't know how. And so they wrote in this, she's going to get the ether, and that's what's going to bring Thor. Because if Jane didn't have the ether, would Thor and any of the Asgardians have gone after Malekith at all? I mean, I don't know. It almost feels like the only reason he cares is because he's trying to protect Jane. It's very clunky how Jane is inserted here. I mean, I do kind of like the scenes when she's on Asgard, but how we get there is terrible. Malekith and the Dark Elves are terrible villains. None of it's explained. They keep trying to do this with Thor, where they're trying to insert science into the Thor, and that doesn't really fit with the Thor character. Thor is this space god on Asgard. That doesn't really fit with all this science stuff they're trying to do with the first movie and this movie, and which I think is maybe a reason why the Jane character doesn't really fit with Thor, because that's her world and his world is space god. So it kind of feels like they wrote this backwards, where they had to figure out how to get Jane in here, and then they went from there. And that is not good writing. Again, I do like Darcy. I thought she was still funny as ever. I kind of like what they did with Selvig. I like that they at least touched that he was controlled by Loki for so long that it kind of gave him some kind of mental problems that he has to work through. So that was kind of cool, but then they keep showing that scene of him running around naked at Stonehenge. We don't need to see that twice. You just show it once. Again, I don't know. It's a little too goofy. I do like that we did get a cool fight scene with Frigga. She didn't get much to do in the first movie. She only had like a few lines. So she gets a little bit more scene time in this movie before she dies. But she did get a cool fight scene. At least she went out like a boss, protecting Jane and everything. So that was pretty cool there. And then, of course, we get the reveal that Loki is not dead. He's actually taken the place of Odin on the throne. And then the end credit scene where one of the warriors and Sif go to the Collector, and they give him the ether because they call it an Infinity Stone. And then they say the Tesseract is already on Asgard. It's not wise to have two Infinity Stones so close together. So it is confirmed at this point that they are Infinity Stones. Again, we don't really treat the ether like an Infinity Stone, or the Reality Stone that it is in this movie. I think Odin does kind of call it something, like an ancient stone or something in the movie. He kind of tries to explain it a little bit. But again, no mention that it's the Reality Stone and that's its powers. I just feel like this movie, we don't know what we're doing with this movie. We have all these ideas, none of them make any sense. We're going to throw it all together, throw Jane in there, and then also tease that maybe Thor and Sif should be together, but no, he's going to choose Jane. It's just a little much. Again, I do like the Loki stuff. Again, him talking with his mom and grieving over her. That was good stuff. I really enjoyed that. And just kind of the banter he and Thor have when he's like walking with Thor and he's changing into all these people and he changes into Captain America. That's a lot of fun. Again, Darcy's always funny. She's making funny jokes everywhere. But the villains are terrible. We don't know anything about the convergence or the ether or what's going on. Jane is clumsily inserted. So this movie's kind of a hot mess. But it's not that bad. I actually don't hate the movie. There are enough things in there that I enjoy. But I really don't like that we have the big battle on Spartalheim with Malekith. And then we have another battle in London with Malekith. They need to pare down that ending a little bit better. And that's really kind of my main problem with this movie. It's also one of the problems I had with the first Thor movie is we had just too many endings going on. So, yeah, I don't hate this movie. It's definitely at the bottom of my list for MCU movies. Right down there with probably Iron Man 2. But it's not bad. I still don't hate it. If it's on TV, I'll probably watch it. I don't really hate any of the Marvel movies. But this one is not very good. So it's definitely kind of low quality. Luckily, the next Thor film gets better, and they do get Thor better after here. But yeah, this movie's just not. I don't know. It's okay. So the Phase 2 start off with Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World is not a very strong start. But luckily, the next movie is Captain America: Winter Soldier, and that's awesome. So Phase 2 will pick up with that movie. So those are my thoughts on Thor: The Dark World. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel for more Marvel reviews. Next is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. We're all finished with She-Hulk, so check out my She-Hulk finale video. And until next time, thank you, Loki. Your commentary is not at all distracting. Bye.